When my parents rewrote the will, I was cut out. They left everything to my brother and his children. At Sunday dinner, my mom looked me in the eye and said, "We're not going to waste our legacy on someone who didn't build anything." Dad grinned. "You've always been a stranger, now it's official." Raising his glass in honor of his brother, he said, "Here's to the present future of this family." I smiled coldly. "Thank you for finally showing me my place. Remember this moment, I promise." Years later, I made a move that left them with nothing but regret. Now they are begging, "Please talk to us." I don't even know how to start this without sounding like I'm fishing for pity. But whatever. I need to get this out before I lose my mind. I'm 35, single, no kids, and I'm the forgotten brother in my family. I always have been. Last Sunday just hammered that home in a way I can't ignore anymore. So, my parents, Nick and Galena, have this tradition of Sunday family dinners. Every week, like clockwork. I used to think it was about keeping us all connected. But let's be honest, it's really about my older brother, Andrew. Andrew is 38, married to Oksana, with 2 perfect kids who can do no wrong. He's the golden boy. He always has been. Every Sunday, I show up out of some sense of obligation. I bring a bottle of wine or a dessert, something to show I'm trying. I walk in, get the standard half-hearted side hugs, the "oh, you made it," like I'm some stranger crashing their little sitcom family moment. But last Sunday, that was something else. From the moment I walked in, I could feel it was different. Mom was all over Andrew and Oksana, chatting about everything they'd done that week, smiling, laughing. Dad kept making these weird comments about family legacy while passing the mashed potatoes. I tried to brush it off, figured maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, after dinner, as we were all still around the table, Dad stood up and cleared his throat. He tapped his glass, like he was about to give some kind of speech. I actually thought he was going to make a bad joke. But instead, he said they had an announcement. Mom's smile was tight, forced. Andrew looked smug, leaning back in his chair like he already knew what was coming. Oksana was scrolling on her phone, barely paying attention, and the kids were chasing each other around the room. Nobody seemed to care except me, sitting there feeling this cold knot growing in my stomach. And then Dad drops the bomb. "We've made some updates to the will, and it's time to make sure our family's future is in the right hands." Right then, I knew. I knew exactly where this was going. But I just sat there, listening, because some part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong. Mom turned to me, and her voice was so flat. "We're not wasting our legacy on someone who never built anything." I couldn't even react. My body went numb, like I was frozen in that chair. And then Dad just had to twist the knife. "You've always been the outsider. Might as well make it official." There it was. Everything I'd always felt but never wanted to believe was true. I wasn't their son. I was a guest, a charity case they tolerated because they had to. Andrew was grinning like he'd won a prize. Oksana actually smirked, barely looking up from her phone. "To the real future of this family," Dad toasted, clinking his glass with Andrew's. Mom followed suit, and even Oksana raised her glass, though she looked bored. I just sat there. I don't even know what I said next. Something like, "Thanks for making it clear," or maybe just "got it." I stood up, pushed my chair back so hard it scraped against the tile. No one even tried to stop me. "Don't be dramatic," Mom called after me as I walked out. But I didn't stop. I didn't even grab my coat. As I slammed the door, I heard Andrew laugh. Full-on laugh. I walked home, the cold biting through my shirt, but I didn't care. I barely remember getting back to my place. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to see their fake concerned messages. But of course, one came. Around midnight, a text from Mom. "Hope you got home safe. Let's talk when you've calmed down." Calm down? I wasn't angry. I was done. That was the difference. I spent most of that night staring at the ceiling, hearing Dad's voice over and over. "You've always been the outsider," like it was some final judgment. And the thing is, this isn't new. Not really. I've always been the spare. Andrew was the sports star, the family man, the success story. I was just the other one, the one who never quite fit. Even as a kid, I'd bring home good grades, and it was never "great job." It was always, "Why can't you be more like Andrew?" Dad would take Andrew to games. I'd get left behind, or they'd dump me at my aunt's house. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't trouble. I was just me. But I guess that wasn't good enough. What makes this time different is how blatant it was. How they just decided to make it official. No pretending we were some perfect family. Just a clear, cold line. Andrew is the future, and I'm the outsider. The worst part? Andrew loved it. He's always loved being the golden boy. Always knew how to needle me, how to make me feel small. He's the perfect son, and I'm the one who never mattered. But you know what? I'm done pretending too. I'm done playing nice. They made their choice, made it clear I'm nothing to them. Fine. Let's see how that works out for them. After that disastrous Sunday dinner, I didn't go back. Not for a while. I didn't answer Mom's texts, didn't respond to Andrew's phony, "Hope you're doing okay," man messages. I just needed space, distance from the whole circus. But the thing is, even when you pull away, life keeps moving. And sometimes you see things you weren't meant to see. I tried to get back to my own life, work, the gym, the same routine. But my mind kept circling back to that night, to Dad's voice saying I was the outsider, to Mom's cold, dismissive tone, to Andrew's smug face, like he'd won something. It was like a bad movie I couldn't stop replaying. But I noticed something else too. I stopped going to those Sunday dinners, but I drive by the house sometimes, just out of habit. And that's when I started to notice the cracks. One Sunday, a few weeks after the fallout, I saw Dad and Andrew standing outside one of the rental properties. They were arguing. I didn't hear what they were saying, but Andrew was gesturing wildly, and Dad looked like he was doing his best to stay calm. I drove by, pretending not to notice, but that image stuck with me. Then there was the house itself. Peeling paint, an overgrown lawn, a cracked window that hadn't been fixed. I knew this place. It was one of the few rentals my parents were so proud of. Dad always talked about their legacy of owning property, building something from nothing. But looking at that place, it didn't look like a legacy. It looked like a headache. It became a sort of habit. I didn't stalk them, not really, but I'd take a different route home from work, one that passed by some of the properties Dad used to brag about. And the more I looked, the worse things seemed. Another house with a broken gutter, another with a sagging fence. Weeds everywhere. The kind of neglect that builds up when nobody cares. But the real kicker came from a random conversation. I ran into a guy I knew from high school. Alex, a guy I hadn't seen in years. We were catching up, and he mentioned he was renting from my parents. "Yeah, place is a dump," he said, laughing it off. "No hot water half the time. Roof leaks when it rains. I've texted the landlord a dozen times. They never fix anything." I tried to act like I didn't know the owners. Just nodded along, listening. But inside I was fuming. I knew who was supposed to be handling the rentals now. Andrew. The golden boy. The future of the family. But it looked like the only thing he was building was a mess. A few days later, I got another glimpse behind the curtain. I went to the house to pick up some old stuff I'd left in the garage. I figured I'd just sneak in and grab it. But of course, I walked right into another argument. Dad and Andrew were hunched over the dining room table, papers scattered everywhere. Andrew was yelling something about a missed repair, about tenants complaining. Dad was trying to calm him down, telling him he had to step up and prove himself. "It's not my fault the plumber didn't show," Andrew snapped. "Stop making excuses, Andrew," Dad fired back. "This is our legacy." I quietly grabbed my boxes and left before they saw me. But I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. Here they were, the perfect family, crumbling under the weight of their own expectations. And I wasn't even involved. But the thing is, I started to notice a pattern. The more I paid attention, the more I saw it. The family legacy was just a fantasy. Dad and Mom bought a few houses years ago, called it an empire, and expected Andrew to turn it into a fortune. But they never actually taught him anything. They just assumed he'd figure it out because he was the chosen one. And Andrew? He was great at looking the part. Acting like the successful son, smiling for family photos, making dumb jokes to keep everyone laughing. But he didn't know the first thing about real responsibility. He didn't know how to maintain those properties, how to handle tenants, how to actually do the work. I should have felt bad, maybe even reached out to help. But I didn't. Part of me was just watching, like a spectator at a slow-motion car crash. I wanted to see how bad it would get. A week later, I got a text from Mom. "We haven't seen you in a while. Maybe you could come over this Sunday?" I left it on read. Then Andrew called. That was a shock. He never called me unless he needed something. "Hey, so, I know things got kinda weird, but maybe you could swing by this weekend? Dad could use an extra pair of hands with some of the paperwork." "Paperwork?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Yeah, just, the rental stuff. It's a lot. More than I thought." "I thought that was your legacy," I said, maybe a little too sharply. There was a pause. "Yeah. Well, it's a lot more complicated than I expected. Good luck with that," I said, and hung up. After that, the calls came more frequently. Mom would try to sound casual, asking how I was doing, if I needed anything. But the real question was always the same. Would I help? But they never said sorry. They never admitted they were wrong. It was all just desperation wrapped in a thin layer of fake kindness. Then one day, I was driving past one of the houses again, just out of habit, and I saw it. A big orange sticker on the front door. A notice from the city. Something about code violations. I laughed out loud. They weren't just in trouble. They were drowning. And as much as some part of me wanted to feel bad for them, another part was starting to enjoy the show. Because for once, I wasn't the outsider looking in. I was the one watching them struggle. And they had no one to blame but themselves. Watching the cracks form in my family's perfect facade was like watching a slow-motion disaster. I wasn't just a bystander, I was an outsider, and for once I was okay with that. They made me the outsider, and now I was seeing what their so-called legacy really was, a crumbling house of cards. But I didn't just watch. I leaned in. It started small. I ran into another one of Dad's tenants, a woman named Marissa, at the grocery store. We chatted for a minute, and she mentioned the same complaints I'd heard from Alex: leaky roof, broken heater, no response to her texts. She seemed embarrassed, like she was the problem for even asking for repairs. "You know you have rights as a tenant," I told her. "If they're not fixing it, you can call the city." Her eyes widened. "Really? I thought I'd just get evicted." "They can't do that," I assured her. "Not for asking them to keep the place livable." I didn't push her, but a week later I saw a city inspector parked outside her house. She must have called. Part of me felt a little guilty, like I was turning on my family, but then I remembered they weren't my family. Not anymore. Not the way they'd made it clear at that Sunday dinner. Word spread faster than I expected. I didn't even have to do much. Another tenant reached out to me asking if I knew how to get repairs done faster. I told him the same thing: call the city, file a complaint. A few days later, I drove by one of the rentals and saw another bright orange notice taped to the door. Code violations again. And then the calls started coming. Not from tenants, from my family. First, it was Mom trying to sound casual. "Hey, honey, haven't seen you in a while. Thought maybe you'd come for dinner." "Busy," I replied. I didn't owe her anything more than that. Then it was Dad. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. "Have you been talking to the tenants?" he demanded. "I run into people," I said. "Sometimes they talk." "You're causing problems," he snapped. "Andrew's trying his best." "Is he?" "Because it doesn't look like it." Silence. Then he hung up. Classic Dad, never a real conversation, just control and anger. Andrew was next. He actually tried to show up at my place. I didn't answer the door, watched him through the window as he knocked, looked around, then stormed off. I got a text 5 minutes later: "This is serious, man. You're messing with our lives." I stared at the text and I couldn't help but laugh. Messing with their lives? No. They were messing with their own lives. I was just letting them see the consequences. Things escalated faster than I expected. More tenants started complaining, and the city began issuing fines. I found out one of the properties was behind on taxes. Another had a leak so bad the ceiling was starting to sag. Tenants were leaving. Dad and Andrew were scrambling, trying to keep up with repairs they couldn't afford. Then Mom called again. But this time, there was no pretense. "I don't know what to do, Igor," she whispered. "Your father is so stressed." Andrew's barely holding it together. "I thought you might help." "Help?" I repeated. "Like you helped me at that dinner?" Like when you made it clear I'm just a guest in this family. She was silent. I could almost hear her trying to figure out what to say. We were just trying to keep things secure. He was supposed to it. Yeah, he was supposed to be the future, right? Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. I hung up. I was shaking, but I didn't call back. Over the next few weeks, the situation got even worse. The fines piled up. Tenants started leaving in droves and the city started taking notice. A few properties were on the brink of being condemned. It was chaos and I was just a spectator. Until one Sunday when I decided to go back. Not for dinner, just to watch. I parked down the street, just out of sight, and waited. Dad's car was there, and so was Andrew's. I saw them arguing on the porch, waving their arms, shouting. Mom was inside, staring out the window, pale as a ghost. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything except a cold satisfaction. They were finally living the reality they'd chosen. But then something happened I didn't expect. Oksana, Andrew's wife, texted me. She'd never been anything but cold to me, one of those fake smiles at family dinners, polite but distant. But now she was begging. Igor, please. The kids are scared. Andrew's not himself. He's under so much pressure. We can't lose the houses. I didn't reply. I didn't owe her anything. Andrew tried calling again. Then Dad. Then Mom. Each time, I ignored them. But the voicemails piled up. Igor, please just come talk to us. We didn't mean for it to go this way. You're tearing the family apart. The one that hit me was from Dad. I never wanted this. I just wanted you to have a future too. We all did. What a joke. I finally texted back, just once. You picked your team. Stick with it. After that, the silence was almost deafening. No more calls. No more texts. Nothing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally free of them. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I kept hearing from tenants, more complaints, more problems. One guy said the heat had been out for weeks. Another said his ceiling had started to mold. It was like the entire empire was rotting from the inside out. So I helped them. Not with repairs, I wasn't a handyman. But I showed them how to file complaints. I helped one guy draft a letter to the city explaining the health hazards in his unit. I even went with another to the local housing office showing him how to report code violations. I wasn't just watching the disaster unfold anymore. I was making sure it couldn't be swept under the rug. And the best part? They couldn't do a damn thing about it. They wanted me out. They made me the outsider. Now they were begging for my help and I was giving them exactly what they deserved. But I wasn't done yet. Silence has a weight to it. After all the calls, the texts, the desperate voicemails, they stopped. No more frantic messages from Mom, no more guilt trips from Dad, no more angry outbursts from Andrew. It was like they'd vanished. And for a while, I thought maybe that was it. They'd finally figured out they were on their own. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter in my mailbox, thick and heavy. It was from Dad. I almost tossed it without reading, but curiosity got the best of me. Igor, I know things have been bad between us. I never wanted it to be this way. We're facing some challenges with the city code violations, missed payments. It's gotten out of control. Your brother is struggling and your mother is worried sick. We could use your help. Just a little support just until we get things back on track. Please think about it. Dad. Support. That's all I was ever good for to them. Some backup plan, an extra set of hands when the golden boy fumbled. But they were right about one thing, it was out of control. I started paying closer attention, checking city records, following the complaints against their properties. They were piling up. Fines. Code violations. Missed repairs. A few tenants had already left and more were threatening to follow. One of the houses was on the verge of losing its rental permit altogether. And then it got worse. A friend of mine, who works in real estate, mentioned that one of the family's properties was up for sale. Not at market price, well below. A desperate sale. I didn't even have to guess who was selling. They were drowning and they were trying to sell off their legacy to stay afloat. Part of me felt a strange satisfaction. They were reaping what they sowed. But another part of me, one I tried to ignore, felt something else. Not pity. Not guilt. Maybe just a hollow sense of disappointment. This was supposed to be their grand empire, their legacy. And they were selling it off like a second-hand car. But I wasn't done. I made a call. Talked to my friend. I wanted to make an offer on the house, but not directly. No, I wasn't about to walk in and wave a check in their faces. I had my friend handle it, made it look like a normal buyer's interest. The price dropped again. And again. I didn't even have to negotiate. They were that desperate. Finally, the offer went through. I bought the house. Their house. The one Dad used to brag about, the crown jewel of their little empire. I didn't tell them. I just waited. A week later, the calls started again. Dad, this time sounding panicked. Igor, we need to talk. Please, son. Just talk to me. I ignored it. Then Andrew showed up at my door. He looked like hell, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. You have to help, he blurted out the moment I opened the door. I don't have to do anything, I replied. We're losing everything, he choked out. The city's on our backs, the tenants are threatening lawsuits, the bank is calling. Sounds rough, I said, starting to close the door. He shoved it back. Don't do this, Igor. We're family. I laughed. Actually laughed. Family? That's rich coming from you. From all of you. Fine, he snapped, the desperation turning to anger. Fine, you want me to say it? I'm sorry. We were wrong. Mom and Dad, hell, I screwed up. But you can't just watch us burn. Watch you burn? You did this. You and them. I didn't set the fire. I just stopped pretending it wasn't there. He stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched. For a second, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But then he just deflated. Turned and walked away without another word. Days passed. I didn't hear from any of them. Not a text, not a call. The silence was almost unsettling. I started to wonder if that was it, if I'd finally broken them. But then I drove by the house I'd bought, their house. There was a bright orange notice on the door. City seal? A condemnation notice. I parked down the street, just watching. A car pulled up, Mom's. She got out, looked at the notice, and started crying. Real, open, uncontrollable sobs. Dad was in the car, staring at the steering wheel, not moving. And I should have felt something. Anger, satisfaction, maybe even pity. But all I felt was cold. Like I was watching strangers. That's when the letters started coming again. Mom begging. Dad making promises. Andrew saying he'd do anything to fix things. They even had their lawyer reach out, offering to negotiate the sale of the house back to them. I didn't respond. Not to the lawyer. Not to them. Because here's the thing, they were never really my family. Not the way they always acted. They had a son. They had their golden boy. I was just a spare part, a backup they didn't need until everything fell apart. So I kept the house. I didn't move in, I didn't want it. But I owned it. I had the deed. And they had nothing. Mom tried one last time. She showed up at my door, tears in her eyes, makeup smeared, looking like a ghost of herself. Please, Igor. We're sorry. We thought we were doing what was best. You thought Andrew was best. And I was nothing. We were wrong, she whispered, voice cracking. Yes, you were, I said, and closed the door. I heard her crying outside for a long time, but I didn't open it again. Yeah? Now it's quiet. I still drive by the old neighborhood sometimes, see the overgrown lawns, the empty houses they used to own. Their legacy rotting away. They picked their golden boy. They built their empire on sand. And when it all came crashing down, they tried to crawl back to the outsider they'd always ignored. But I'm done being the outsider. Now I'm just free. I don't feel bad. Not even a little. They made their choice. And for the first time in my life, I made mine.